Why are there so many graves in Colma? And so few in San Francisco? When you drive around the tiny town of Colma, just south of Daly City, you can't help but notice a certain redundancy of scenery. Tombstones, a florist, more tombstones, another florist. What Las Vegas is to gambling, Colma is to death. Nearly 3/4 of the 2.2 square mile town is zoned for cemeteries, of which there are 17. The town's population is approximately 1,431. In many parts of Colma, neat rows of gravestones are visible for as far as the eye can see, on display for each of the town's final resting places. Flip through and your eye catches on bold letter names like Joe DiMaggio and William Randolph Hearst. When death got the drop on Wyatt Earp, the legendary Old West lawman was buried in Hills of Eternity Memorial Park, a Jewish cemetery. On the other hand, if you want to browse graves in San Francisco, your choices are limited. There's San Francisco National Cemetery in the Presidio, but that's technically on federal land. The lone cemetery in the city proper is at Mission Dolores, but the cemetery is just 1/6 its original size, says Andrew Galvin, the Mission Dolores curator. 11,000 dead people were buried there from 1782 to 1898. San Francisco graveyards of the past. San Francisco was once full of cemeteries. In the gold rush days, they decided to build cemeteries in the western part of the city where nobody would ever want to live, says Michael Svanovic, a San Mateo County historian who's the go-to guy on this topic. 4 huge cemeteries, Laurel Hill, Calvary, the Independent Order of Oddfellows, and the Masonic Cemetery, were established on land the University of San Francisco occupies today. These cemeteries took up between 60 and 70 square blocks. Golden Gate Cemetery out by Land's End took up a similar swath of space. An 1873 map shows the big 4 cemeteries in San Francisco. As San Francisco's population rapidly grew, homes were built on all sides of the cemetery complex. Streetcars had to navigate around these islands of the dead to transport residents to work and back. This now became very valuable land, and people turned against the cemeteries. By 1880, San Franciscans had grown disenchanted with its burgeoning population of dead folks. Headlines like "Cemeteries must go" began to show up in local newspapers, and residents became concerned over hysterical claims about health hazards. Scientists warned that throat maladies constantly assume a malignant type when the patients are exposed to a wind that blows from a crowded cemetery. In 1901, San Francisco banned any new burials within city limits. For several decades, what to do with the cemeteries was a hot-button issue. With no endowments to pay for upkeep, cemeteries like Laurel Hill fell into ruin. Those who coveted valuable graveyard land could rely on at least one legitimate talking point. The cemeteries had become a real mess. After San Francisco ended new burials, there was no money to care for existing cemetery grounds, and many graveyards fell into ruin. Statues and gravestones were toppled. The valuable bronze doors on private mausoleums were stolen. People would reportedly wander in and get drunk. Colma, the incorporation. The first to move out of San Francisco were 2 Jewish cemeteries, Hills of Eternity and Home of Peace. In the 1880s, they abandoned the plots of land that now make up Dolores Park for the open farm area of Colma. A few years later, the San Francisco Archdiocese, running out of room in San Francisco, established Colma's Holy Cross Cemetery. As space for San Francisco burials grew tighter, more of San Francisco's cemetery associations looked south, purchasing large plots of Colma's farmland. Until the 1880s, 2 Jewish cemeteries stood where Dolores Park is today. In 1924, 14 cemetery associations incorporated the town of Lawndale, Colma's original name. It is the only city incorporated for the sole purpose of preserving and protecting the dead. The founders had good reason to be explicit about the new town's purpose. After all, many of the remains that came to Colma had been moved several times. A body could have first been buried in the Gold Rush Cemetery, only to be moved to Yerba Buena Cemetery, on to City Cemetery by the Legion of Honor, and finally to the cemetery complex where USF now stands. They didn't want living people in Colma. Every time somebody came forth and wanted to open a store, the town council voted it down unless it was a floral shop or something associated with a cemetery. San Francisco, and then there were 5. By the 1920s, the only San Francisco cemeteries remaining were the so-called Big Four, as well as the one at Mission Dolores. In the face of public hostility, the Oddfellows and Masonic cemeteries agreed to move to Colma, but 17 families went to federal court to block the Masonic move. Those bodies were transferred only after sale of the land was approved in a 1930 Supreme Court ruling, Calvary Cemetery from above in the 1930s. The Catholic Church successfully made the case that the Mission Dolores Cemetery should be allowed to stay for historical reasons. Just 60 bodies were moved to Colma between 1930 and 1932. The Catholic Church also balked at uprooting Calvary Cemetery. The Archdiocese didn't like the idea of giving future plot owners and other cemeteries the idea that nothing is sacred or permanent, not even the place where you are laid to rest. But eventually they relented, which left one cemetery, Laurel Hill. What's it like to grow up in Colma? Anti-cemetery activists made 3 unsuccessful attempts at ridding the city of Laurel Hill by putting the issue before voters. In 1937, they tried once more. The official argument against the measure alluded to the many notable pioneers buried in the cemetery. Gratitude and common decency should permit these dead to rest in honored peace, it said. On the pro-eviction side, proponents included photos of the decrepit graveyard marred by tumbled tombstones, above captions such as, "Is this respect for our dead?" This time the measure to evict passed. Removing the bodies was, well, a very sophisticated operation. If the casket was in good shape, they moved it with the body. If the casket had deteriorated, the bones were placed in boxes. Remains were required to be brought by hearse on the same day. The Catholic Church also required a priest to witness the exhumation of any bodies from Calvary Cemetery. The condition of remains disinterred varied from dust to almost perfectly embalmed bodies. The latter resulted from the filling of cast iron caskets with groundwater acting as a preservative, wrote William Proctor in a 1950 San Francisco Department of City Planning report. The smell of death was often present, even though the remains had been laid to rest from 30 to 70 years previously. The head of the disinterment told Proctor, "Workers removed bodies from the Oddfellows Cemetery. About 130,000 bodies were disinterred from the Big Four cemeteries and moved to Colma. Most were reburied in mass graves with a single monument to mark their presence. For the 55,000 Catholic pioneers who were moved from San Francisco to Holy Cross in Colma, no marker identified them at their new resting place until 1993. Where the tombstones went. When the San Francisco cemeteries were moved, the bodies were transported for free, but survivors had to pay if they wanted to keep the tombstones. Many survivors couldn't be found, and the majority of tombstones did not make the trip to Colma. Instead, they were sold for a few pennies each to be used in public works. Some lined the gutters, which you can still see in San Francisco's Buena Vista Park. Others were spread around the city. Priceless crypts, tombs, and private mausoleums were unceremoniously dumped in San Francisco Bay to create breakwaters at Aquatic Park and St. Francis Yacht Club. And discarded tombstones were used to build a seawall along the Great Highway. They still resurface from time to time, as they did in 2012 at Ocean Beach. Some left behind. They missed a lot of the bodies, says Alan Ziachka, the University of San Francisco's official historian, speaking of the mass transfer to Colma. No one knew that until 1950, when we put up our first major building after the Depression. That was Gleason Library, which, like much of the university, was built over what was once Masonic Cemetery. At least 200 bodies were found during excavations when a backhoe churned up a whole mausoleum. Since then, every time a major excavation has occurred on campus, remains have been found. A work crew breaking ground on the Hayes-Healy Residence Hall in 1966 came upon so many bones and skulls that they refused to continue working until the human remains were moved from the site. Roughly 55 coffins, 29 skeletons, and several skulls were unearthed. Legion of Honor, where bodies are buried. One of the most startling cemetery discoveries came in 1993 when the Legion of Honor was undergoing seismic renovation. As the dig began, about 750 bodies were discovered from the Golden Gate Cemetery, also called City Cemetery. which was used from 1868 to 1909. About 18,000 people were buried there. The LA Times reported that remains included a man who had a third arm buried with him, several medical school cadavers, and 2 coffins containing remnants of denim with rivets stamped Levi. One person who got a close-up look at the Legion of Honor remains was photographer Richard Barnes. His exhibit on the discovery has traveled around the country. I think the juxtaposition with the Grand Temple of Art is pretty interesting, Barnes says. The idea of preservation of the past and what that represents. Whose past is honored and secured, and whose is expendable. Barnes told SF Weekly in 1997 that the original Legion of Honor contractors, working in the early 1920s, just plowed through burial sites, and plumbers laid pipes right through bodies and skeletons. They threw headstones off the cliff into the ocean, he says. Remains found during renovation at the Legion of Honor in San Francisco, 1993. From the Richard Barnes exhibit, Still Rooms and Excavations. The Lincoln Park Golf Course was also built where Golden Gate Cemetery once stood. What is presently the 18th fairway of the golf course was a burial ground, primarily for the city's Italian community. The area that now constitutes the 1st and 13th fairway was the Chinese section of the cemetery, and the high terrain at the 15th fairway and 13th tee was a Serbian resting place. Can it happen again? Some find the Odyssey of San Francisco's dead prior to the 20th century unnerving. Who knew that after you die, your body could be so peripatetic? San Francisco is a testament to the reality that your remains may not remain, or that they may remain when they're not supposed to. And you'll get a building on top of you to boot. Ensuring that your final resting place is really your final resting place was the very idea behind establishing Colma as a modern-day necropolis. Yet even in Colma, the sanctity of the grave is not what it used to be. The needs and whims of the living have encroached over the years. For example, Sunset View Cemetery, a burial ground for paupers in 1951, became a golf course. The question we ask is Colma safe? It seems as though it is, for now.